to us in the Chamber of Commerce and Industry from Munich and Upper Bavaria to our conference, Ricardo at 200. When David Ricardo, the great British economist, described his theory of comparative advantage in his work, Principles of Political Economy and Taxation in 1817, the state of Bavaria had been a kingdom for just 11 years, and Munich had only 53,000 inhabitants. Working life was dominated by agriculture and craftsmanship, and it would be 50 years before the first industrial structures and companies were established. 200 years have since passed, and Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage has proved to be the utmost influence on the economic development of many countries, especially since World War II. In a nutshell, Ricardo believes that reducing existing trade barriers and opening markets improves the wealth of all nations, not only of those already producing at a very effective level, it also enhances the economy in countries that are not yet producing as effectively. Ricardo's economic philosophy holds that the free trade and the division of international labor create a win-win situation for all participants. Following the Second World War, Ricardo's theory provided the academic foundation of the new economic world order. A key milestone in shaping the post-war world was the negotiation of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which was signed in 1947. GATT was intended to reduce customs and trade barriers among the member companies in the following years and decades. In 1994, GATT was succeeded by the establishment of the World Trade Organization, the WTO. David Ricardo's principles are manifested in GATT and the WTO, are without any doubt important keys for the development and success of the Bavarian economy. The economic rise of Bavaria began slowly after the Second World War, accelerated in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, and continued to increase in the past 15 years. Today, Bavaria, with a gross domestic product of nearly 550 billion euros, is economically stronger than 21 of the 28 EU members. If it were to be regarded as an independent country, Bavaria would rank 7th after Germany, the UK, France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands. A key pillar of the Bavarian economy is export. The export share of the Bavarian economy in last year was 52%, so that every second euro earned in Bavaria was actually earned abroad. In the Munich area, the share of export is currently 67%. If Bavaria were an independent country, it would rank 20th among the largest export nations, with total export of 182 billion euro in 2016. Not billion, million euro. Vehicles, electrical products, and machineries are the most important export product groups. Together, they make up an export share of 65%. 50% of Germany's total exports and 17% of Germany's total imports are from and to Bavaria. Currently, the issue of trade balance is discussed by the President of the United States of America. As for its overall trade balance, Bavaria has a trade surplus of 17%. Something I find very interesting in our main foreign trading partners is that we have a large trade surplus with some countries and a large deficit with others. The Bavarian economy has a pronounced trade surplus with the United Kingdom of 9.3 billion euros, with the US of 8.9 billion euros, and with France with a surplus of 6.1 billion euros. At the opposite end of the scale, Bavaria had its largest trade deficit with the Czech Republic of 6.8 billion euros, with Hungary with 5.2 billion euros, and with Poland with a deficit of 3.2 billion euros. We have no doubt that the Bavarian economy will continue to be an engine of the growth in Germany and Europe. However, we are concerned about the rise of protectionism in countries like the USA and UK. From our point of view, there is no alternative to free trade and an open economy. We also believe that the social counterpart to the system of free trade is democracy, diversity of opinion, and freedom of speech. Of course, our current and future products will only be successful on world markets if they are competitive and innovative enough. Research and science are therefore key requisites for innovation. Bavaria currently spends 3% of its gross domestic product on research and development, which makes it to one of the leading places for R&D in Europe. We are very glad to have a well-developed university landscape in Bavaria, flanked by such renowned research and scientific institutions as the Max Planck Society, the German Aerospace Center, the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, as well as the Helmholtz and Leibniz associations. And we are very glad to have the Institut in Munich. Founded in 1949, it is one of the leading economic research institutes in Europe and the one most often quoted in the German media today. So this seems a perfect moment to hand over this podium to the president of the Institut, Professor Clemens Fuest. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Clemens Fuest, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this conference. I would like to thank, in particular, Peter Driessen and the Chamber for Industry and Commerce here in Munich for this cooperation, and I would also like to thank Philipp Harms from the German Economic Association, the Committee for Trade, for cooperating here with us. And I would like to thank last but not least, Gabriel Felbermayr, who was key in putting together this conference, as you all know. As was just mentioned, we are living in times where it is important to remind the public, to remind people in general and politicians of the fact that trade is useful not just for those exporting, but in fact for everyone. Now, Ricardo and thinking about a comparative advantage reminds me of a story about Paul Samuelson, if you like, the father of modern economics. I don't know if this story is really true, but this is the story. When he was at MIT, some physicists asked him, look, is there anything in economics you can't understand in 3 minutes? Is this really a science? And apparently he said, okay, look, even if a country is more cost efficient than all other countries, the other countries can trade with this country, and this is to the benefit of everyone. And apparently, the physicists did take more than 3, 5, or even 10 minutes to understand. So I think that's what this shows is. If these geniuses at MIT don't understand the theorem of comparative advantage. It is understandable that our politicians have a hard time understanding it and appreciating it. And that's why I think it's great that we have this wonderful conference. So thanks again to all of you for being here today. Thanks in particular to our speakers. We have some of the most eminent economists in international trade among our speakers, and I think this is great. Thanks for coming to Munich. I'm looking forward very much to today's conference. Philipp, over to you. Thank you.
My name is Philipp Harms, and I would like to welcome you, dear participants, on behalf of the Standing Field Committee in International Economics of the Verein für Sozialpolitik, the Association of Economists in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I'm extremely pleased that this conference has caught your attention and that you have found your way to Munich. As one of the organizers of this event, I would like to express my gratitude to the IHK München and Oberbayern for offering this beautiful venue. Moreover, I would like to thank the IFO Institute for taking care of the many organizational details in a very professional way. I would like to thank the speakers and discussants, as well as the participants in the panel discussion, for sharing their thoughts with us. Last but not least, I would like to highlight the role of Gabriel Felbermayr, who has been the mastermind behind this conference. Many thanks to all of you for making this event possible. In fact, when Gabriel first approached me more than a year ago with the idea of organizing a conference in honor of David Ricardo, the UK was still a fully fledged member of the European Union, and few people would have predicted that Donald Trump would become the next president of the US. Now we are there. As far as Brexit is concerned, future negotiators on both sides of the Channel are raising the stakes, and it might well happen that free trade between the UK and continental Europe will be as constrained as free movement of labor and capital. In the US, policymakers are no longer talking about eliminating non-tariff barriers in the context of TTIP. Instead, Stone Age protectionism seems to come back into fashion, driven by a vague feeling that other countries' exports are unfair, while maximizing domestic exports is desirable. Of course, the current wave of announced or already implemented protectionism goes directly against Ricardo's fundamental insight that trade, driven by comparative advantage, is welfare enhancing to all countries involved. So this conference is more topical than we thought it would be when we started thinking about it. But couldn't we have seen it come? Isn't the recent turn of events just the consequence of a growing uneasiness with globalization that has been voiced for a long time? While the 1990s seemed to be characterized by a general consensus that free trade was a good thing, serious criticism of globalization started to emerge around the turn of the millennium. People highlighted the painful structural adjustment associated with exposing an economy to international competition, and they pointed at the long-run distributional implications, which, of course, did not catch economists by surprise. In fact, it would be both arrogant and foolish to downplay the fact that globalization, while creating gains for the economy as a whole, resulted in considerable losses for individual groups and persons. So is the recent backlash against free trade just a symptom of growing inequalities? And are the recent results of referenda and elections just a sign that an increasing number of people who are hurt by globalization voice their frustration? In a current research project, Jakob Schwab from the German Development Institute and I are exploring this question by using two waves of a large international survey study, the International Social Survey Program, or ISSP. In 2003 and 2013, the ISSP asked respondents in various rich, emerging, and developing countries to give their opinion on the following statements. First, your country should limit the import of foreign products in order to protect its national economy. And second, large international companies are doing more and more damage to local businesses in your country. Respondents could choose whether they disagree or agree with these statements or whether they abstain from a definite opinion. Jacob and I started by coding a binary variable that was 1 when the respondents did not agree or strongly agree with these statements, thus expressing a positive view or at least indifference towards trade and multinational enterprises. We then identified some individual traits that should characterize potential winners and losers from globalization, most importantly, education and real income. Finally, we estimated the impact of these characteristics on the likelihood that a respondent expressed a positive attitude towards trade and multinational enterprises. If the narrative was true that the recent anti-globalist sentiment reflects a growing antagonism between the winners and losers from globalization, the marginal effects of education and relative income should have been higher in 2013 than in 2003. Surprisingly, this is not what we found. Instead, the coefficients, while still having the expected sign, seem to have decreased over time. To highlight just one example, in 2003, being a university graduate instead of having no formal education at all increased the likelihood that a respondent expressed a positive attitude towards free trade by 23%. In 2013, this difference has shrunk to 12%. The results and the effect of relative income are similar, and the decline of marginal effects can also be observed when it comes to respondents' view on multinational enterprises. There are various interpretations of these findings. One is that the lines between winners and losers from globalization are no longer as clearly defined as they used to be. Given recent advances in technology and communication, even university graduates may feel threatened by foreign competition and express a more skeptical view on economic openness. An alternative interpretation, however, is that those persons who potentially benefit from free trade and the presence of multinational enterprise no longer perceive the relationship between economic globalization and their own well-being, or that they are just reluctant to speak up in favor of economic globalization. Our analysis is still work in progress, and I don't want to oversell these results. But if the second interpretation is correct, it may point at a problem that is very different from the notion that the anti-globalist backlash reflects growing distributional conflicts. Perhaps many people have just become complacent, taking the welfare-enhancing effects of economic openness as given. If so, then it is time to remind ourselves and others of what is at stake in terms of prosperity and diversity if the project of economic globalization is abandoned. To send such a reminder is one of the key goals of this conference. Thank you very much.